Hi everybody, this is Paula Januszkiewicz and we're going to present today hackers' perspective on your infrastructure and how to keep them out of your life. This is a keynote at SecTor, so absolutely a pleasure to be here. Let me do a bit of a housekeeping, a bit of introduction, and then we're going to go directly to the subject. So as you see, Paula J, what I'm doing for a living, I'm the CEO of SecTor. That's the company that I have established 12 years ago when cybersecurity wasn't that popular. Nowadays, we've got 42 people on board and 4 locations, which is New York, Dubai, Switzerland, and Poland. And besides that, being in cybersecurity for the past 15 years, I'm also a Microsoft Regional Director, though I'm not working for Microsoft, and I'm not a director here. So that is actually a very interesting title that is given by Microsoft to someone who is innovative in technologies, and I got a pleasure to represent that. But at the end, I really hope that it's not the first time we are seeing each other, so absolutely a pleasure too to see you again, because I'm also speaking at some other events, like, for example, Black Hat, or for so many years, or at the same time, RSA. For example, I was keynoting in San Francisco, also Microsoft Ignite. So happy to share our research with everybody, and that is a very special presentation because it's a keynote. So we're going to dig into the hacker's perspective to pretty much see what is happening right now, especially in times for the remote work. So that is the background. Now, whenever we are thinking, of course, about the whole content of the presentation, why do we actually talk about hackers' perspective? Well, especially because, as we mentioned, we've got a case of the remote work, and we've got also a situation where everybody is sitting at home, and we are struggling for different solutions that could actually provide us secure remote work. So eventually different large organizations like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and so on, they are already prepared for the needs of a remote workforce, but others, and for others in general, the wild-scale adoption of remote working comes with some real challenges. And that is also a really good perspective to have, because nowadays, when we look at some of the statistics, we've got one of the interesting statistics that were shared quite recently, saying that from February 2020 to March 2020, so even 1 month, we had an increase because of the pandemic of the attacks by 569%, while in the world of ransomware, we have an increase by 72% of ransomware samples. So these are the really interesting stats that are also putting us in a certain direction while we are designing a good cybersecurity posture, especially in times for the remote work. So in general, in Scramble to ensure the safety for others, it's absolutely important that businesses do not overlook the need to ensure cybersecurity as well. Now, whenever we look at various agencies and various organizations that are actually encouraging us to take a better approach in cybersecurity. We have, for example, an organization called CISA, that's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, part of the Department of Homeland Security. And these guys actually issued an alert that is encouraging organizations to take a good approach to cybersecurity. And they said that there is a possibility of increased vulnerabilities, attacks, phishing attempts, and at the same time, for example, when we take into consideration, let's say, Checkpoint, they were saying in their stats that cyber criminals are using coronavirus pandemic to spread spam activity through both like email campaigns and malicious domains. So that is basically what we are dealing with right now. But at the same time, when it's about data breaches, we've got since 2005, according to ITRC, so Identity Theft Resource Center, and a statistic that says that since that time, we had over 10,000 serious data breaches publicly reported. So that's a lot. Now, that's the hacker's perspective as well. So we've got the data that people are sharing right now. We've got remote access that is today more enabled. And we've got also challenges that are related with keeping things up to date and eventually using a personal device at work. And taking a deeper look into all of these aspects, we should definitely not overlook the hacker's perspective, so how hackers are seeing this situation right now. And one of the first things that I would like to share with you is the perspective of three aspects. So awareness, behavior, and culture. So awareness means we know what's going on with cybersecurity. We know different cases, examples. We are educated in cybersecurity. So in here we've got behavior. We know how to act. And eventually that is all bring to us by good cybersecurity culture within the organization. And I really like to share in this example a really good story that is confirming basically the situation with awareness, because sometimes we might think we know something or we kind of feel this is a good situation, but in cybersecurity it's really a 0-1 momentum where either we got hacked or we simply don't. And one of my favorite stories are related with a security project that we were doing for our customer in Switzerland. And that is actually a project that was involving not only social engineering, but it was also involving technical pen tests. Yes, so getting to the customer from the outside perspective, so external pen tests, internal pen tests, and a couple of other things out there. So what was happening? Well, first of all, starting with social engineering, my job was to get into the customer building, and yeah, it's a regular situation. Yes, so you've got a building entrance, and eventually you've got the way to use your card. You do the deed, and then the door opens. So as simple as this. You can also use the pad with pin on it, where you type the pin, and then the door opens. But I don't have a pin. I don't have a card. Eventually, another third way to get access to the customer building would be to you call them. Yes, so there is this way to communicate with them, and there is like a camera, so they're gonna see you and they know who's coming. Really bad thing to do for social engineering. So what I did something that we normally call tailgating. So I stick to one of the guy's backs, and eventually I managed to go through the door with this guy. So I mean, normal stuff, right? Nothing really hacker related. Yeah. On the other hand, when I was in the area when there were two elevators, because that was my next stage of the project, I was standing, of course, in front of them, and there was an elevator A and elevator B, and my job was to get to one of the floors that customer had. So let's say it's going to be 5, 6, and 7. So they were sharing these 3 floors, and they were announced on the 7th floor. So I don't want to go there because there is a receptionist. So I would like to prefer to go to 6th and 5th. So how the whole situation looked like? Well, these 2 elevators, so A and B, they were called for on the outside pod. So you could press the floor number that you wanted to go to outside of the elevator, and then it was showing you whether it's A or B. So I was waiting actually for someone to do that. So don't get me wrong, it's just my job eventually. But there was this guy who came in, and I could see that he pressed the floor number 5. Fantastic. So he was also quite handsome, just to be very open with you. And this is really what makes the job nicer in a sense. So the next part was that when the door opened, there were only 2 of us, and this guy jumped to the back. Actually, this guy jumped to the elevator, but what I did, I kind of like went through it, like just like went to the elevator and jumped to the back side of the elevator. So I was like the last one, and he was the first one. Yeah, so that was the setup, and the door closed, and that's it. So now we are getting into the conversation, because my job is to get to the company, and my job is to steal data of that company. So I need to make these things very smooth. So first conversation is, of course, hi, how are you doing, and so on. And this guy says, hi, how are you? I'm fine, and that kind of stuff that we normally do. And my next thing to say, because he was like smiling, he was a nice guy. So I said, it's nice to see you again. But don't get me wrong, we never seen each other before. Yeah. So this guy felt that. So he started to think like, what was the last time I saw her? And you could judge it by his face, like thinking a little bit like, was she is she like like did I actually see her somewhere or on a party, or what was it? So he said, it's nice to see you again too. So I'm thinking liar, but eventually that is this conversation that we got into. So this guy is definitely into it, yeah? So my next part was to bring this conversation to the next stage, and please don't get me wrong, it doesn't get any further, but it actually helped the project. So I said, you know what? And this guy was like, what? And I said, you smell very well. And he was like, do you think so? I'm like, mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was basically this kind of a different level of conversation. Yeah, you know what I mean. So the next part was that we actually got to the 5th floor. This guy was happy, so he actually kept his back straight, and he kind of lowered his voice in a sense. And because he was the first one to go out, he took his cart, and guess what? He just did the peep. He opened the door and he said, "Ladies first." So I'm getting into the building, right? In a quite a seamless way. I know it's brutal. Some of you might not like it, but that's the fact. And that's why we are talking about awareness, because nobody would expect a hacker maybe even to look like this, yes, to be absolutely fair with you. So I'm getting into the building. And I'm bringing the different tools with me. For example, crafted modified USB drive to stick them into some of the places. For example, one of the USB drives that I've got, they technically look like this. This is something that we call DigiSpark, and when you encode it, it can, for example, steal your data, yes, because it is not really a USB drive. It is a device that you can technically stick in, and it's going to perform the actions that you're going to code on it, yeah, so that's the setup. Anyway, long story short, I was hanging on the floor with some other people, and it's pretty much this was the financial organization. So I was in the traders floor. So when they finish up some of the transactions, projects, whatever, they technically stood up and they left for lunch. And one of the guys did not really lock their desktop. And you might be wondering, oh, well, we're getting to the subject of not locking the desktop. Well, we are actually getting to this subject because that particular organization, according to company policy, they said that they're gonna lock your desktop after 5 minutes of inactivity. So my next question for that organization was, is this a lot or not? Because 5 minutes does not really make people to make an effort. It's like, doesn't matter. My desktop's going to be locked in 5 minutes anyway. Yeah. But if it was 20 minutes, that would be a different story. That would be thinking more like, oh, it's 20 minutes. I don't want to leave my data like this or my laptop in general unattended for 20 minutes. And this is really what make this guy and lots of people, as we notice within this company, to leave actually their desktop unlocked. So the next stage, when I was pretty much sitting at this guy's computer, I was like started to yaw. I was making some noise in the place where I was sitting, and nobody really noticed. And people were not even asking why you're sitting at someone's desk. And that is the beauty of social engineering, that people expect that when you do things with the confidence, they are to be done right. They are the ones that you're supposed to be doing. Yeah? So that is the concept that we got over here. So let's sum it up a little bit. And that is really the hacker's perspective, to have that when we do things with the confidence, when we do things with the good quality, they may go through different security checks, different anti-phishing filters. We might do a little bit better job when, for example, we're going to do checks on who is working for that organization, and then craft emails with a sense of who this person is. And this is how people manage to get in, especially nowadays when they are sitting at home and they have more time to think about how this particular person or company should be approached. Now, just to give you another interesting statistic, within a really long time ago, I was doing the project for the oil and gas company where my job was to get inside. And one of the things that I started was something that we call password spraying. Not a really big deal, right? It means that we are using a certain password and having a list of employees. And in my case, that was almost like 6,000 employees. And I sprayed them with the password of company name 2020. So imagine that out of this, let's say 6,000 people, 29 people had a password company name 2020, which means the phishing that I'm bringing to that company, it's the different level. It's not by someone from somewhere trying to give you $1 million. It's actually your pal saying that, hey, check it out. There are people to be fired from the certain position, and right now pandemic is something that's our problem, so maybe you should better check out to make sure that you're not the one. So who would not really open that kind of a file? And whenever you've got that kind of situation, then that phishing, it's definitely more effective, more productive than the regular phishing that we were dealing with in the past. So summarizing, we've got behavior. So when we see that threat, we act. Yeah. When something does not smell right, it's most probably not right. And behavior comes with awareness, which means we are aware that these attacks can happen, especially nowadays when we've got a case of a remote work. So eventually we are more careful. And if we have questions, we can always consult someone else to give us a second opinion, because it's really a 0-1 situation within cybersecurity. And at the end, culture comes with understanding. And when we take into consideration some other cybersecurity statistic, which I really like because they put us in a interesting direction sometimes. 14.4 incidents per year are of unintentional data loss are related with the employee negligence. So that's technically means as well that that kind of culture to be created within the organization, it is one of the most important steps to make sure that cybersecurity is taken care of. So long story short, whenever we are thinking, of course, about the perspective that we got right now and the cybersecurity that is indeed a problem from many perspectives. So we look at the cybersecurity holistically. So one thing could be social engineering. Another part could be the way how we execute the code. We've got a huge popularity of cybersecurity right now, especially when we have a look at the statistic related with cybersecurity ventures, where these guys say that there will be additional 3.5 million cybersecurity job openings by 2021. Well, that's great, but the question is, will these jobs be filled up with good specialists? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because some time ago, Financial Times was saying that by 2019 actually, um, we will have a need of 6 million cybersecurity professionals, but with the current growth, we're going to have from 4 to 5 million. So we are definitely 1.5 soldiers short. So how these guys supposed to fill up cybersecurity jobs? It's great, everybody needs cybersecurity. It's just a problem right now in the market with a skill set. That's why as well different situations happen. So it's not only because of the users, but sometimes it might be through misconfigurations, or simply we are understaffed and there is nobody, for example, to perform certain function within the organization. So that happens too, and we've got many examples of those. Therefore, whenever we are thinking, of course, about that skill set and things that should not happen in cybersecurity, let me give you a bit of a perspective. So James Comey, the former FBI director, he was actually saying that 200, it's the average amount of days that hackers are sitting in the network before they are actually discovered. So that's really cool statistic, because it says that these guys, they have lots of time before actually we even learn that they were there, which eventually it's quite positive, because at least we actually discovered that. It could have been longer, but luckily it's not. But when we look at that amount of days, that's absolutely hilarious. And that's something that we are seeing actively at the customer side. Imagine that just last week within our team, we had 2 incident response cases. One is actually on the government level that is related with the data leak, and another one is related with the factory across really whole world, because it's a really big factory where data has been encrypted by the ransomware. And within this data leak that I was mentioning, hackers were sitting in the environment. So that was last week, since November 2019. So it's even more. That's totally crazy. So eventually we got that case, we learned that, and then we've got another interesting statistic that says we've got 80 days after detection to full recovery. Well, is this really the amount of days? It's actually longer, I can tell you, and it's more expensive than that, because eventually someone has to bring consultants to the field, and we have to evaluate, analyze, redesign, and it looks like one of these infrastructures will be actually completely wiped, and we will need to redesign everything from scratch. So that's absolutely a big cost, where eventually everything could be prevented if good security measures were kept in place. So let's talk about 7 security issues that should just do not happen. Yeah? So that is one of the cases that we've got and we use in organization passwords. And that maybe sounds quite boring, because passwords should not be used anymore, but sometimes we don't really have choice. We have to actually use passwords in some of the configurations, and that's quite unfortunate, because eventually that is something that I would like to show you over here within the demonstration, how passwords could potentially be a problem. So let's see. We've got over here a service, and that's Paula service. And within this service, we've got an account, and that's the Freddy Krueger account, just for example, to demonstrate a service that is running on the dedicated account. Like, to be sincere, I've never seen an organization that did not have that problem. And that particular service account is the one that eventually we're gonna be here extracting the password from. So how do we do that? Well, we have over here the console, and within this console, we're gonna get into our tools, and here they are. Now over here, we have to, in order to extract password from that particular service account, elevate to the local system. And the reason why it's like this is because that kind of system secrets are actually managed by system, as the name stands for itself, and that's something that we call data protection API system. So you have to use these passwords. We could use GMSAs, group managed service accounts, but they also store password in the registry. The only difference over here is that GMSAs can only log on the single server that you set up during the configuration, and for these accounts, usually they can log on also interactively and across many other servers. So that's usually the problem, though it can be changed, absolutely, but that's not what we are seeing in the organization. Anyway, PSExec, of course, the tool from sysinternals to elevate to the local system, who am I, and then we got this, and then the next stage, of course, it is to get into tools back again, and that's our first tool that I would like to show you. CQ Secrets Dumper, of course, all of our tools are free, which allows us to find the service, and then PJ service, and then we are getting the password in a clear text. That's how easy it is. Now, what I also mean by pathetic passwords are passwords that are used across different services. So for example, it might be also related with users having password in LinkedIn that is similar to password on Facebook and so on. So that is the concept. So the whole logic about password that we have is obviously to not to reuse them, but also think in a way about passwords that whenever you put the password somewhere, think about it that you always share it with other people. And I'm not like thinking here about some technology or solution. No, people. So when I configure a service with the password like this, I share that password with some other people. And you might be thinking, well, then we don't want that. Exactly. So whenever we have a possibility and we are enforced, like here, to use the password, let's use the password that's going to be obviously unique. And that's what we are seeing quite often in organizations, that even within the administrative environments, these passwords might be lookalike, and that when it leaks from one place, it can be reused or modified in some other place too. Now, an interesting fact here, yeah, about all of that is also related with other places where the password could be stored. So eventually, let me run another console over here, and one of the interesting places for this one would be IIS. And within the IIS, when we've got application pools, so just another setting in Windows operating system, we've got an application pool called Snow, www.snow.com. And that application pool runs on the Freddy Krueger's account. Okay, so let's encounter that fact. And now when we're going to get into the configuration of that web server, so we're going to go to Windows, System 32, we're going to go to iNet SRV, and then we've got Notepad, application host, so we're going to go to config, and then we're going to go to Notepad, application host config, fantastic, and then let's search for Snow, and within Snow, over here, you are able to see that we've got a certain like password. Yeah, so that's this one. It is encrypted, and it's also encrypted symmetrically. How do we know? Well, because it says it's an AS provider for IIS. Yeah. So how do we decrypt it? Well, simply we just ask for the configuration a Windows process activation service. And how do we do that? Well, simply we use the appcmd tool, and we do list and then app pool and then www.snow.com, and export for me all the settings text asterisk like we see. So then we are able to see over here that we've got a username Freddy Krueger and the password. Yeah. So that also comes out in a clear text. And there are over 20 places like this, over 20 that we are able to extract the password from in operating system. So every single time we actually put the password, there is always a possibility to get access to it, and that's what we always have to remember, whether you do it on LinkedIn, Facebook, or you do it within the configuration of the operating system. That's the first hacker's perspective. Now, whenever we are thinking about some other ones, of course, locking the desktop, and that is something that I've been already mentioning by the story, but locking the desktop or unlocking the desktop or leaving the desktop unlocked, that's something that provides us a possibility to introduce not only some software that could run as us, and that means that if we save password in a browser, then hacker could get access to the password that is saved in the browser, because we run things as we are, and that's what we're going to be as well demonstrating in a second. But it also leaves us a possibility to introduce this guy. Yeah, so that is basically the DigiSpark that I was showing you. And if the desktop remains unlocked, then basically we've got over here the possibility to eventually play with the pen drive. Yeah. Now, for that moment, what is also important is to wonder, of course, if we've got antivirus that's up to date and so on, and that is something that we were going to be using for running this DigiSpark. So it depends basically on what kind of tools, libraries we run, and so on. That is basically the perspective here to have. Okay, let me switch to the my environment over here. Fantastic. And what we're going to be doing over here is the virtual machine. Let me get there. That's the one. Okay, where I will need to log on to it. Yep. Okay. And then basically we are here listening for the incoming connections. Yeah. And eventually the goal is going to be to take this pen drive, stick it in, and let's see what we got. And sometimes, of course, we're going to be running over here a threat that is PowerShell related. So we're going to be executing the code. So if you got an antivirus, for example, that is relying on machine learning, that is such a better option over here, because it's going to correlate various events and then prevent the attack. But if you have a classic antivirus, then in such case, in the vast majority of cases, this attack won't be discovered. Yeah? But of course, the world is getting better and better, and eventually we all should have a possibility to recognize a threat that is brought by PowerShell. Now here, I'm going to run actually our custom library, CQ post exploit lib, and that's the one that within the antivirus with the correlation machine learning, it will be detected, to be fair, and within the classic antivirus, it won't be. Yeah. So anyway, let's see what we got. So it's going to be fun. Here we go. I'm going to stick it in within the USB port. That's what I did. So it's a live demonstration. Let's see if it works, obviously. And within this demonstration, we will try to connect to this particular machine, where we're going to be eventually, we're here listening, of course, for the incoming connections, where we're going to be accessing the computer that I'm running right now. Awesome. So we got this. So today I made my day because I actually hacked myself. So eventually you can see that that's Paula. So I'm right now a hacker, but I'm actually on the Paula's computer. And the library that I was talking about, and let's do it. That's the post-exploitation library. And that particular library allows us, for example, to do the print screens and so on. Yeah, so to take over the camera. So that is also quite an interesting perspective here. So just to show you the setup, I've got over here as well a Hackers server. Yeah, with some backup files already loaded. Yeah, so we've got this one. Yeah, and eventually there's gonna be like new files appearing while I'm gonna be presenting some additional stuff over here. Anyway, let's see. First of all, we're gonna load the post-exploitation library, which, as you can see, that's the PS1. So eventually we can run it. That's the PowerShell, of course. Done. And right now, for example, I'm gonna be playing with the for example, snapshot. Yeah. So let's do the screenshot first. That's interesting. And I got actually in here 3 screens connected. So that's going to be quite an extensive screenshot, but let's see what we're going to get. Here we go. That takes a moment. Yep, done. Okay, awesome. And then when we refresh it, there's a new file appearing, and that's basically the setup that I've got right now. Yeah. So long story short, that is the screenshot. Yeah. We can also play with some other things. Yes, like for example, the webcam snapshot. That could be also quite interesting because I am connected to the camera right now. So let's see basically how that goes. Maybe it will work, maybe it will not, but eventually on the user that is not, that was basically the case because I'm connected to the camera right now, but eventually on the user that is not connected to the camera, I will be able to see the user itself. And then eventually we've got a key recording, that's my favorite part, where we are able to demonstrate what kind of things we are eventually typing. So I've got Notepad and test, and I'm typing thing into the Notepad. So any password the user types, I'll be able also to record. And we don't need to be an admin for that. Yeah. Now, my favorite part that is related with finance, and that is basically related with replacing the clipboard. So for example, when we do the money transfers, especially this is useful whenever we've got a situation, for example, in the finance department, then we are copying the accounts, we're not really typing them. And this is the demonstration that shows us the situation, the possibility where we are able to affect the security of that kind of operations. So, and I'm pretty sure that you've heard many situations where someone actually transferred money to a different unit, but this is something that I would like to show you live. So eventually we've got over here the invoice and there is an account number on the invoice. So we can copy that. So I copied that and eventually we're going to paste it, yeah, in this notepad baby here. And that all works. Yeah. So that's this account that we are looking at. Okay, great. But the next stage over here would be to actually run our tool. Then let's go to the invoice once again. We're copying this account once again. And then over here in Notepad, we are pasting it like this. So whatever is on the invoice, it's going to be pasted in a different set of numbers. Yeah. So this is how we are able to affect the security of the clipboard by the user. Okay. So this is basically something that could potentially come out whenever we've got a situation of the desktop technically remaining unlocked. Anyway, that also shows us another perspective that is related with a pen drive. And let me show you this one in a second. Here we go. So in here, when we look at the statistic from the pen drive perspective, USB stick up, we've got statistics that say that whenever there is a 90% of pen drives and they got company logo, then basically people take them and they stick them in, and the success ratio is very high. And 60% of people will do it when there is no company logo. So that's also quite an interesting perspective because it shows us that we don't have within most of the organizations statistically the USB culture showing us that technically that device could be a bad device. And at the same time, whenever we are executing things like this, eventually at the end, we can protect, of course, and prevent the code from being executed by implementing things like whitelisting, because eventually we can configure that that particular device will do different steps. So click here, click there, and so on. But at the end, we have to download some code or run some code, maybe build in Windows tools in a certain way in order to do something for us. So whitelisting could also involve things that are mentioned on the low bus or loan bins, and that stands for living of the land binaries that are built in operating system files that could also do something dangerous. Like, for example, certutil could download files. We've got also bitadmin that could download files, and so on. So there are plenty of ways how we could run the code in a malicious way. So that is basically the concept here, plus of course the policy for managing devices. Okay guys, now fish biting, so things that are related with phishing, and that's also quite an interesting concept, because within phishing we've got a possibility to execute the code eventually in the name of the user. And what I would like to show you is basically whenever we've got a certain attack that happens and hacker eventually manages to become a certain user, then basically how can we and what kind of data we are able to attack and affect while we are running things as user. So let's start that particular scenario by showing you a simple concept that is related with the phishing file. And that could be basically an Excel spreadsheet that is delivered to the user. And we're going to be using the same Kali Linux machine over here. And that particular machine, we will specify that it should listen on the port. So let's begin over here. Yeah, so that it should listen on the certain port for the incoming connections. Okay, so once again, we are listening on the port 443 over here, but this time for different thing. So if, for example, within phishing, we've got something like this file with the macro potentially. So let me show you this one in a second. Then question is, what kind of stuff here are dangerous? And of course, if we've got information about macros, user may or may not run it. It's to be totally fair. Yeah, so users might be educated to not to click things like allow macros, but when the file is being sent from my PAL because someone managed to get access to my PAL's mailbox, then maybe that situation will actually happen. So what's so vicious about this file is that here, that's the Excel spreadsheet. But if you have a closer look over here, yeah, then, and let me enlarge this, you've got the lines for the spreadsheet that are not exactly like the lines that are indicating us that there is a separate column. And that's why we could be thinking as a user, like, haha, I'm going to be smart over here. I'm not going to click calculate salary button because it's obviously dangerous. But most of the people, what they do when they open an empty Excel spreadsheet, they actually click somewhere in the cell. And that's the problem, because the whole thing here, it is actually a picture. And let me show you this one first before we actually execute it. So here you see, this is an empty cell. And the whole thing here, the border here given, that's the picture. Yes, it could be much, much bigger. So the user could think, ha, it's going to be a picture. Let me see that. And then the user will basically fail on a bunch of tests here. So let me click on anywhere, really anywhere. And here it says like wrong number or something. Yeah, so we could just do whatever. Okay. And then if all goes well, here we are receiving again a connection, the remote connection on the or to the user's console. And who am I? I'm Paula again. So I've been hacked twice. But eventually, what is the next stage over here? The next stage is to look at the data from the user's perspective. And that is something that I would like to show you. So now we are getting into the subject of data protection API. And even though it is a keynote, I will allow myself to bring in a demonstration that is slightly technical, but to show you the importance of maintaining your passwords, like different secrets and so on, in the applications like KeePass. And nowadays, especially, that's interesting and important, because if the hacker manages to get access even to the user device, yeah, then we are able to extract lots of data that are secrets of the user. But if the user had a KeePass that is not relying on a Windows logon, then it's a different story. Anyway, let's dig in. So I am right now logged in over here as Freddy. Yeah. So long story short, I'm able to see that, well, that's simply Freddy. And I will lock the desktop over here to show you one important thing, that when I'm supposed to log on as Freddy, I'm actually logging on with the password. Okay, so that's it. Data protection API relies on, for the domain users, on two things. One thing, it's the user's passwords hash. So technically, in this case, it is MD4. For local users, it's SHA-1. So just to make a difference. And the second thing for the domain user, that is the private key and the public key of the domain. Now, you might be wondering, what's this? Because we really cannot hear about it that often. That's something, by the way, that our team discovered within the data protection API research. And that is something that I would like to share as well with you. So what I did, I've opened on the user session Chromebus. That's an application from Microsoft, showing us that here we've got a situation that we've got a Freddy Krueger and so on. So the password is there. That's the password that Freddy stored in Chrome. Now, anything that runs as Freddy has access to that password. So I hope that that's clear. Now, what we're going to do over here, we will actually reboot. So in this particular case, we will, in that matter, we will actually reboot from the ISO image to change user's password that is used over here. So the cache logon data. So that's going to be the setup, and then eventually our job over here, it's going to be to you log on with the cache logon data, and then the next stage, it's going to be to eventually verify if a hacker is able to get access to the user's computer by leveraging at that stage the different password that might be potentially used over here. Anyway, so let's give it a try. I have connected to this machine an ISO image, and let's see if we're able to overwrite cache logon data. So we're going to restart this machine, and then we're going to log on with a different password, and then you're going to see that our secrets are partially dependent on our password. We can do this demonstration both online and offline, by the way. And what is important here is that we're going to do it actually offline, because it will be more linear to show you various aspects of that. Yeah, so that's the setup. So simply speaking here, rebooting, yeah, of course we could say BitLocker could help it, but don't forget that demo could also be done online. This is just nicer, yeah, to observe. And while we are booting over here, one of the things I would do, I would actually make sure that user will not be able to log on to the domain anymore. So that's the cache logon data change, okay? Cache logon data, sometimes called cache credentials, aren't really credentials. So that's something that eventually we can safely use, because PBKDF2 function that is used to generate those, it's not really something that right now it is a threat for us. Also, cloud providers are using those, so no worries about this one. Okay, anyway, so we got this one. So we are rebooting to the Windows PE, and then eventually the next stage would be to work with the cache logon data. So we've got next, repair your computer, like this, very easy setup. Then we go to troubleshoot, then we go to advanced options, command prompt, and over here we're going to go immediately to CQ tools, where we've got Kiwi Secure Edition and Mimikatz. That's by Benjamin Delpy, but that's actually our module, and Secure Edition of the Mimikatz, it's actually not recognized by the classic antivirus. And then over here we're going to do LSA dump cache like this, and then we're going to specify that we would like to overwrite cache logon data in order to use the different password so that we can see if the credentials that are stored over there are visible. So we're going to do C or D, in this case Windows, system32 config, and then system, because this is where the boot key is, and cache logon data is protected with the boot key. So it's like a value that is just used to encrypt data and store them in the registry. Not necessary at some point, because that key is in the registry anyway, but here we go, config. And then we're going to do security /kiwi to overwrite cache logon data. That worked. Okay, awesome. The network is switched off, so now we can reboot. And we're going to see that eventually, while we're going to log on with a different password, we're not able to get access to the user's secret. And that's a good news. Bad news though, and let me use this momentum while we are rebooting to actually use some other machine over here. And the bad news is that we are able to decrypt user secrets by using the private key that is stored within the domain controller. And each of you, and that's the best part, has it. Each of you. So here we go. let's get this key here. And we are doing this by using the command cq else secret damper, super easy, file, exported pfx, enter. So we have exported that to the exported pfx. Let me import it actually to show you how that looks like. Next password is small letters secure. So here we go, next, and that's it. And let's see it, cert mgr.msc. In personal certificates, we've got here this not available part, and that's issued to nobody and issued by nobody certificate. That's really strange. It's a ghost certificate that each of you has, and unfortunately you cannot change it, you cannot upgrade it, you cannot delete it, there's nothing you can do about it, but when it leaks, it allows you to decrypt every person's secret in a domain. Let's see how. So here, when we are supposed to log on as Freddy Krueger, I'm typing in password. That doesn't work because we have changed the password. So we are logging as a domain user with the change logon data. So Mimikatz, bring it in, and that's something that works. So domain user right now has a second password, yeah? But that password and the way how we log in won't allow us to get access to the user's secret. And that is relatively good news, right? Have a look. We open up Chrome-Pass, and then nothing over here comes out. So we will just need to wait for the various master keys to be decrypted, and then eventually we're going to see that there is nothing here available. Okay, so let's wait for the result, but eventually we can get to the console already to start decrypting user secret, because that's what we have to do. That's why we are here. And as you see in the background, the password over here, it's empty. So first I need to know where the Google secrets are stored, and also some other DP API secrets. For that, I'm going to use the tool CQ DP API Blob Searcher. Again, of course, you can find it on our blog. And we're going to specify the directory where the Chrome stores its profile-related information. So it's going to be users, Freddy Krueger, then we've got app data, let's make it a full screen, local, and then we've got Google, and then Chrome. Let's do recursive search, and let's do the output to CQ tools, and then let's stream everything to dpapi.txt, enter. So as I mentioned, we are, as we could see, the only and the first team that did the full reverse engineering of the cryptographic platform in Windows. So we are absolutely happy to share everything with you. And let's see what we got within the DP API TXT. And over here, we've got a list of secrets that are actually used by Google. And that's really cool because we got that in the user data default cookies. And then we've got SHA-1, triple dash, and the name of the master key that is used by Google. And that SHA-1, it's not really a good thing to see, but that's what we got in Google Chrome. But anyway, let's see. So that's B55. It's a very crucial information for us, because the next part we will need to do is to use this B55. Yeah, so let me actually copy the path of it once again. So that B55, so we're going to actually go to the path over here. So it's going to be app data, Microsoft, protect, SID. This is hidden and system. So if you want to see it for yourself, then basically you will need to display those in the options of the folder. Shift right click, copy as path, and that B55 will be the one that I'm going to be using in the command right now. We are almost there, by the way. So let's see. First of all, I will need to generate my own passwords hash right now. So my password is Mimikatz. And then we got this. Why do we need this? Because first, in the decryption process, what we will need to specify is what we would like to decrypt, and that's going to be our master key. And we would like to decrypt it how? With the PFX from the domain. And we would like to encrypt it how? New hash with the current passwords hash. Why do we have to even encrypt it? Well, because that's how DP API works. Okay, so bring it on. We have to have things in the encrypted stage in order to be able to use them, yeah, using the API. That's how it works. So let's do it. We got the new master key that has been created over here. So that's this AD modified that's new. So we're going to take this guy, rename it to good, yep, and take this AD modified and put it in here. Perfect. So this one, well, we'll need to give it an attribute of a system and hidden, as you see, and that's really the last step to do, because if we get in here and if we refresh Chrome Pass, it actually gives us the password. What's the conclusion? And that's really scary, is that whoever is a domain admin can decrypt every privacy information that is encrypted on the Windows platform across the whole enterprise. So if you have 100,000 people working in your organization and someone is with that power, this person can totally get access to people's LinkedIn, Facebooks, and everything, private keys, emails, and so on. So this is to show you two perspectives, that when you run things as user, obviously DP API gives us immediately access to all of our secrets, but if, of course, we've got a bigger scope of an attack, that's also possible if we've got a private key from the domain. What's the conclusion here? Well, first of all, privilege access management, the review of the privilege within the domain, which is replicate directory changes and replicate directory changes all, absolutely crucial to review. And also, from the user perspective, implementation of whitelisting, so to not to run the code that we don't know. Yeah, and these are the aspects that we should take into consideration, and eventually using the complex or strong password to make sure that even if someone manages to get access our hash for the specifically local user in this case, then it's hard to break it, so that we can get the password, so that we can get the SHA-1 for the local user and then decrypt the secrets. So these are the perspectives to have. Okay, cool. So long story short, that is what phishing could lead to. Now, just to mention, reckless abandon, yes? So devices and management of the devices that were eventually stolen. Now, especially right now when, according to statistics that were driven, by the way, by asset, we've got people that are eventually processing information that is work related on the personal devices. And when we look at these stats by asset, these guys say that 81% whoever uses a personal device, it also uses it for the work related function. So that's also interesting. And 46% of people who actually use a personal device for work, they also let someone else use it. So that's also quite an interesting statistic that shows that personal devices are currently a problem. Now, when we process company-related information on the personal devices, when we, for example, at that stage lose it, are we actually informing IT? So there needs to be some kind of a policy. Another part is related with Wi-Fi. And also, according to statistics we got, 31% of people, according to Asset, they connect to the company via free or public Wi-Fi connection. Now, the question, of course, is what kind of business apps we use. Can we change the traffic on the fly, and so on? So there are different aspects that are worth taking into consideration. One of the things that are a big problem nowadays in the organizations, especially from the inside perspective, it's simply lack of SMB signing. And also on our blog, you are able to find a video, actually that's one of the most popular videos, that is related with the SMB relay attack. So I would actually direct you to this place to see how we are able to use SMB or overuse SMB and Antinom version 2 to attack resources in our organization. And then eventually, at the end, we've got the item related with being a little bit too social. So eventually, we are sharing too much data within the internet, and that is the hacker's perspective that allows us, for example, to guess maybe questions that are helping questions to recover the password. We had a case not really long time ago where there was a guy on LinkedIn from a certain company, and he liked Tesla cars, and on one of his personal emails he was using, there was a recovery question, what's your favorite car? And we typed in Tesla, and that worked, and that was so much fun because this information was super easy to find. So that kind of things we should never encounter when we are designing, of course, our security, even for personal use. So all of these technologies are great, but at the end, why human factor is so important? Well, at the end, not every organization has all these technologies in place, right? We've got, for example, something that will protect us from malicious macros and some other items, for example, different API calls and so on within Windows. That's the attack surface reduction rules, which you are able to implement within the PowerShell. Who has this? Yeah, so it's to be implemented in PowerShell, and it's also easy, but not every organization is dealing with it. So macro could be still a problem, and you are still able to create a child process from Excel. And that's why we are saying that security is both reality and feeling. So when we feel that the context is missing, yeah, and it's all about cybersecurity context, then we should not step farther. And reason number two is that, well, but that's maybe not very nice to say, but not every attacker is that smart. And what we mean by this is that sometimes we are just um, trying, or we are just put in a situation when we potentially could be a target of some random activity, and then that randomness does not really make us to believe that that's a realistic attack. And at the end, technology, yes, but humans, of course, we are able to take a picture of data and send it to someone. So even though someone's going to have Azure information protection implemented, then that data could leak because someone's going to deliver it this way. That's why at the end of this keynote, please have a look at the best of a breed security framework that shows us regions in cybersecurity to be covered in every organization. Some of the things, of course, might not be matching your current organizational structure, but this is basically the matrix that shows us where cybersecurity finds its place. At the end, we've got 11 cybersecurity questions to be answered nowadays to get the feeling of the hacker's perspective. So that is technically coming from our experience that we've got by working for so many years with many organizations. And hacker's perspective at that stage is, as we could see, so how do we answer those? And these are the questions that we should ask in order to address the problem. And summarizing, understanding is the key to security. So the more we know, the more we deal with cybersecurity, the better we become, which is quite an obvious thing. But for example, if we've got, let me just give you a technical concept here. Let's say we've got in Windows 10 credential guard, and we know that that's something that protects our identity in LSAS, and eventually it protects domain accounts. But at the same time in Windows, we've got a privilege of impersonate a client after authentication, and that privilege is always enabled. So if the domain admin or whoever else privilege account logs onto the certain server, certain computer, then we could be like, oh, it's okay, we've got credential guard. These credentials will never leak. Well, great, but we can always take over this account by leveraging a privilege. And credential guard does not protect holistically our identity. It only protects this one item. And knowing this kind of flavors that are, as I call them, cherries on the desserts within the operating system allows us to implement effectively a good cybersecurity and design a good cybersecurity posture. So hacker's perspective in general, so putting on the hacker's shoes, that is something that allows us to eventually design a successful cybersecurity strategy and at the end stay secure. So here you got some additional resources that I'm following. These are a bit of a news magazines, but if there is something that's interesting happening, we always get in there to get this first insight. If you guys have questions, bring them in absolutely. And if you would like to download our tools, you can see them in our blog. So this is basically secureacademy.com/blog. And if you would like to get more insights about what's going on, of course, we share more information about our blog, where we are able to find, when you are able to find more articles, more videos, and so on, including, of course, the new item that we've got that's related with the Advanced Windows Security course for 2021, which we run once a year. So here we go. And thank you so much for attending this keynote. I'm absolutely happy to be able to deliver it, and I hope that you guys managed to get some new insights about what's happening right now in cybersecurity, and I'm so much looking forward to your questions. And Thank you so much for listening. Stay secure, stay safe, and hopefully see you as well within the upcoming weeks, years, and so on in person. So thanks a lot.